Happening now, the agricultural world is in absolute shock. John Deere CEO has just made a move so bold, so disruptive, that it could change the face of American farming forever. We're talking about a decision that has slammed the brakes on a $34.5 billion U.S. farming giant, a company that's been at the heart of America's breadbasket for decades. And the fallout? It's already rippling through rural towns, global markets, and the livelihoods of thousands of farmers. For years, John Deere has been the trusted name powering the machines that feed the nation. But behind the iconic green and yellow paint, there's been growing tension, from controversial repair restrictions to overseas manufacturing shifts. Now, the CEO's latest decision isn't just a corporate strategy tweak. It's a shockwave. Entire production lines are going quiet. Contracts worth hundreds of millions are suddenly on hold. Farmers who placed orders months ago are getting emails saying, "We can't deliver indefinitely." Insiders say this isn't about a lack of demand. In fact, demand for tractors, harvesters, and precision farming equipment is still sky high. The problem? The company is walking away from a massive U.S. operation, choosing instead to double down on a global restructuring plan. That means shuttering domestic facilities, halting certain product lines, and moving critical manufacturing abroad, all in the name of efficiency. But in farming communities, efficiency sounds a lot like abandonment. The numbers tell the story. This $34.5 billion operation wasn't just a corporate asset. It was an economic lifeline. Local economies in Iowa, Illinois, and Kansas are bracing for impact. Suppliers that depend on John Deere orders are suddenly staring at empty warehouses and unpaid invoices. And while the CEO insists this is a necessary transformation to prepare for the future, many see it as a dangerous gamble that risks hollowing out America's agricultural backbone. What's making this even more explosive is the timing. The U.S. farming sector is already on edge. Rising equipment costs, fluctuating commodity prices, and unpredictable weather have made this one of the most uncertain seasons in recent memory. For farmers, the news feels like the rug's been pulled out from under them. Many had banked on new Deere technology to boost yields and cut costs, but now they're scrambling for alternatives, often from foreign manufacturers who don't have the same track record or service network. And here's where things get even more intense. This isn't just about business. It's about power. By shutting down such a massive U.S. operation, John Deere CEO is signaling that the future of farming won't be tied to any one country. It's a bet on global supply chains at a time when supply chains are anything but reliable. Critics warn this could leave U.S. farmers dangerously dependent on overseas factories, vulnerable to shipping delays, trade disputes, and geopolitical tensions. The pushback has already begun. Farmer associations, state lawmakers, and even some members of Congress are calling for hearings. They want answers, and fast. There's talk of tax breaks being revoked, subsidies being questioned, and federal contracts being reevaluated. Behind closed doors, industry insiders are whispering about a potential Deere exodus, skilled workers leaving the company for competitors who are still investing heavily in U.S. manufacturing. And while the CEO remains firm in public statements, sources inside the company suggest the board is deeply divided. Some believe this move is the only way to stay competitive against emerging international giants. Others fear it could permanently damage Deere's reputation as an American farming partner, turning loyal customers into lifelong critics. If this continues, we could be looking at one of the biggest agricultural corporate shakeups in U.S. history. Not just a company decision, but a turning point for how America feeds itself. Already, the shockwaves are spreading far beyond John Deere's own factories. Seed suppliers, fertilizer companies, and grain storage operators are all watching closely. Because when a farming giant pulls back, it's not just equipment sales that take a hit. Entire agricultural supply chains depend on synchronized investment. If farmers can't get the machinery they need, they delay planting, cut back acreage, or postpone upgrades. That slowdown creates a domino effect that chokes revenue streams across multiple sectors. In rural towns, the impact is immediate and visible. Machinery dealerships that once buzzed with customers are now eerily quiet. Service bays that worked overtime during planting season are standing empty. Employees, from skilled mechanics to office staff, are suddenly uncertain about their future. Some dealerships are even considering shutting their doors entirely, unable to survive without a steady flow of new equipment. And when those doors close, it's not just jobs that disappear. It's community hubs where farmers have gathered for decades to share advice, trade parts, and talk about the weather. Meanwhile, global competitors are circling like vultures. Companies from Europe and Asia are ramping up their marketing, promising American farmers faster delivery times, cheaper prices, and advanced features. They're offering financing deals designed to pull frustrated Deere customers into their ecosystems. And in some cases, they're doing it with government-backed incentives, which makes their offers even harder to refuse. If this trend accelerates, U.S. farmers could find themselves tied to foreign equipment suppliers for decades, eroding domestic manufacturing dominance in agriculture. At the same time, grain markets are jittery. Analysts warn that if planting delays ripple through multiple states, it could alter production forecasts for corn, soybeans, and wheat. Lower yields could push food prices higher at a time when inflation is already eating into household budgets. Export contracts could be jeopardized, weakening America's position in the global food trade. What began as a single corporate decision is now shaping up to be a national economic issue with real-world consequences for consumers thousands of miles away from the nearest cornfield. Inside John Deere, the morale crisis is deepening. Engineers who spent years developing cutting-edge autonomous tractors now wonder if their innovations will ever see widespread use in U.S. fields. Factory workers feel betrayed, watching production lines they built with pride grind to a halt. Even loyal dealers are privately questioning whether they can keep championing a brand that's retreating from its own home market. The disconnect between corporate messaging and worker sentiment has never been wider. Political pressure is building fast. State governors in the Midwest are exploring emergency measures to attract replacement manufacturing or negotiate with Deere's leadership. Lawmakers are hinting at possible antitrust investigations, suggesting that Deere's market dominance comes with a responsibility to maintain U.S. operations. Some agricultural lobbyists are pushing for Buy American clauses in federal farm programs, which could lock out foreign-made equipment unless domestic production is restored. Yet, despite the mounting criticism, the CEO remains unshaken in public appearances. He frames the shutdown as a forward-thinking, technology-driven pivot, a necessary sacrifice to streamline operations and position Deere as a leader in the global transition to precision agriculture and automation. He speaks of AI-driven planting systems, drone-assisted crop monitoring, and fully autonomous combines as the future of farming. But for the farmers losing access to reliable, locally built equipment right now, those promises sound like distant dreams while their fields sit unworked. Behind the scenes, financial analysts are split. Some believe the bold move could actually boost Deere's profitability by cutting overhead and tapping into lower-cost production abroad. Others warn that the reputational damage could cost far more than any short-term gains. They point to the loyalty factor, the fact that many farmers stick with a brand not because it's the cheapest, but because it's proven, reliable, and American-made. Once that trust is gone, it's nearly impossible to win it back. And while this corporate chess match plays out, the clock is ticking. Planting season waits for no one, and every week of delay means lost yield and lost income. For the farmers in the heartland, this isn't a theoretical debate about global strategy. It's the difference between a profitable year and financial ruin. The backlash is no longer just brewing, it's exploding. Across the Midwest, farmer-led protests are popping up outside John Deere dealerships, factories, and even corporate offices. Handmade signs reading "Built in America" or "Not at all" and "Don't abandon the heartland" are being hoisted high. Tractor convoys are rolling down main streets, horns blaring, drawing attention from local media and national news crews alike. For many of these farmers, this isn't just about losing a brand they've trusted for generations. It's about losing a part of their identity. Social media has become a battleground. Videos of farmers dismantling Deere logos from their barns and replacing them with competitor brands are going viral. Hashtags like #GreenToGone and #DeerDesertion are trending, rallying rural America against the corporate decision. Even agricultural influencers, the modern-day storytellers of farm life, are weighing in, calling the CEO's move a betrayal to the soil that made Deere great. This kind of public sentiment can't be ignored, and it's already causing ripples in Deere's brand value. Legal action is now on the horizon. Several states' attorneys general are reportedly investigating whether Deere's decision violates previous agreements tied to tax breaks and government subsidies. Some argue that accepting state incentives to expand U.S. operations and then turning around to shut them down could constitute a breach of contract. Class action lawsuits from affected workers and suppliers are being drafted, claiming lost income and damages from the abrupt halt in production. Meanwhile, competitors are sensing an unprecedented opportunity to break Deere's stronghold. Case IH, AGCO, Kubota, and even emerging Chinese and Indian manufacturers are quietly increasing outreach to frustrated farmers. Some are offering trade-in programs specifically targeting Deere owners, promising faster parts delivery and on-site support, exactly the kind of assurances Deere is now struggling to provide. This aggressive poaching could lead to a historic shift in market share, reshaping the U.S. agricultural machinery landscape for decades. Financial markets are watching closely. Deere stock, once considered a safe long-term hold, is showing signs of volatility. Investors are torn between the potential cost savings of global restructuring and the risk of losing America's most loyal agricultural customer base. Hedge funds and institutional investors are reportedly pressuring the board to revisit the scale of the shutdown or at least offer concessions to maintain a U.S. manufacturing presence. For many farmers, though, it's already too late for corporate apologies. Trust, once broken, is hard to mend. Generations who proudly ran Deere tractors on their land are telling their children to look elsewhere. Farming co-ops, once steadfastly green, are pooling resources to import alternative machinery in bulk. In some towns, the shift is so dramatic that local repair shops are retraining mechanics to service entirely different brands, breaking a decades-old Deere service tradition. The human cost is staggering. Families who have worked in Deere plants for 3 or even 4 generations are facing unemployment. Local diners and shops that depended on those workers' paychecks are struggling to keep their doors open. High school graduates who once dreamed of a stable factory job now see nothing but uncertainty. The move has triggered an emotional blow to rural America that goes far beyond economics. It's a blow to pride, tradition, and the belief that American industry would always take care of its own. And still, as the dust settles on these early reactions, there's a growing realization that this might not just be a John Deere story. It could be the opening chapter in a much bigger shift. If one of the most iconic names in U.S. manufacturing can walk away from billions in domestic operations, what's to stop others from following the same path? In Washington, alarms are blaring. Congressional committees are fast-tracking hearings on the John Deere decision, summoning executives, economists, and farming representatives to testify. Behind closed doors, lawmakers are debating emergency measures to protect domestic farming infrastructure. Proposals range from new tariffs on foreign-made agricultural machinery to tax penalties for U.S. companies that offshore production after receiving federal aid. There's even talk of creating a federal farm machinery reserve, a kind of strategic stockpile of tractors, harvesters, and parts to safeguard against supply disruptions. The White House is under mounting pressure from rural constituencies. Advisors are warning that if this crisis isn't addressed, it could become a political flashpoint heading into the next election cycle. Aides are drafting statements that balance the free market principles America prides itself on with the need to protect the industries that feed the nation. The president has reportedly spoken directly to the John Deere CEO, urging him to reconsider the scale of the shutdown or at least delay it until after the current planting season. Meanwhile, global competitors are tightening their grip. European manufacturers are exploring joint ventures with U.S. dealerships to establish a stronger local footprint. Asian companies are pushing aggressively into precision agriculture, pairing machinery with AI-driven farming software that promises higher yields with less labor. And with Deere retreating from certain U.S. markets, these competitors are stepping in with financing terms so attractive that even long-loyal Deere farmers are seriously considering a switch. The geopolitical stakes are rising as well. Agricultural equipment isn't just another commodity. It's a strategic resource. Control over the machinery that plants and harvests America's food supply could become a bargaining chip in international trade negotiations. Some analysts are already warning of an agricultural Cold War, where nations compete not just for food production, but for the technology and infrastructure that makes it possible. In this scenario, losing domestic manufacturing capacity could leave the U.S. dangerously exposed. On the ground, farmers are facing impossible decisions. Do they wait for Deere to deliver equipment that may never come, risking late planting and reduced yields? Or do they pivot now, locking in deals with foreign suppliers and potentially abandoning decades of brand loyalty? The uncertainty is crushing, especially for smaller operations that can't absorb the financial hit of buying new machinery outright. Adding to the chaos, parts shortages are beginning to emerge. With production slowing and some assembly lines already shut down, dealers are warning customers that wait times for essential repairs could stretch into months. A broken axle in the middle of harvest season could mean the difference between a bumper crop and a total loss, and farmers know it. The anxiety is palpable at every county fair, feed store, and co-op meeting across the Midwest. Yet even as the crisis deepens, Deere's leadership appears committed to its long-term vision. Public statements emphasize global competitiveness, innovation, and a borderless future for agriculture. But to many farmers, these words feel detached from reality. They don't see borderless fields. They see the boundaries of their own property, their own crops, and the ticking clock of the growing season. And in that widening gap between corporate ambition and rural reality, the seeds of a much larger conflict are being planted. A conflict that could redefine the relationship between America's farmers and the companies they've trusted for generations. Across the heartland, a quiet but powerful counter-movement is beginning to take shape. Farmers, fed up with corporate dependency, are talking about taking matters into their own hands. Literally. Co-ops that once focused solely on seed and grain storage are now exploring the idea of manufacturing their own equipment. Retired engineers, machinists, and mechanics from shuttered Deere plants are being approached to design cost-effective, repair-friendly machines that can be built locally. The idea isn't just to replace Deere, it's to create an entirely new, farmer-owned equipment ecosystem that can't be outsourced. This grassroots push is gaining momentum fast. In online forums and community meetings, discussions about right-to-repair laws are merging with plans for open-source tractor blueprints. Farmers envision machines that are rugged, affordable, and customizable, without the software locks and expensive maintenance contracts that have fueled frustration with Deere for years. While these co-op built tractors might lack the polish of multinational brands, the independence they offer is priceless to farmers who felt trapped in corporate ecosystems. Meanwhile, the tech sector sees an opening of its own. Silicon Valley startups and agri-tech innovators are racing to develop next-generation farming machines that run on renewable energy, AI-driven planting algorithms, and drone-assisted field monitoring. Companies that once focused on autonomous cars are now quietly shifting resources to autonomous tractors. Venture capital is pouring into the space, with investors betting that the future of farming will be won not by traditional manufacturers, but by whoever controls the software and data. For farmers, this presents both hope and risk. Tech companies promise efficiency gains, predictive analytics, and machinery that can think its way through a harvest. But they also raise concerns about data privacy, subscription models, and the potential for new forms of dependency. The fear is that the current crisis with Deere could simply be replaced by a new form of corporate control, this time from tech giants rather than machinery manufacturers. The industry is teetering on the edge of realignment. If co-op manufacturing succeeds, it could decentralize the farming equipment market in ways not seen since the early 20th century, breaking the stranglehold of a few dominant brands. If the tech sector takes over, farming could become more high-tech, but also more vulnerable to cyber threats, software glitches, and corporate monopolies. Either path would represent a seismic shift in how America grows its food. International observers are watching closely. In countries where agriculture is heavily state-supported, The Deere shutdown is being cited as proof that U.S. farming is ripe for disruption. Some foreign governments are already offering grants and subsidies to their manufacturers to aggressively target the American market. For them, this isn't just about selling tractors. It's about securing a foothold in one of the most lucrative and strategically important agricultural economies in the world. Back in rural America, the mood is shifting from shock to determination. Farmers who initially felt blindsided are now organizing, sharing resources, and exploring alternatives at a scale never seen before. Local machine shops are reporting a surge in custom fabrication orders. Welding classes at community colleges are filling up with young farmers who want the skills to maintain and even build their own equipment. The Deere decision, while devastating, may have inadvertently sparked a renaissance in self-reliance. Still, the question remains, can this grassroots resilience match the scale and speed of a $34.5 billion corporate giant walking away from its home turf? Because as the growing season barrels forward, the machinery gap is becoming impossible to ignore. The machinery gap is no longer just a looming threat. It's here, and it's hitting harvest forecasts hard. In the Corn Belt, delayed planting from a spring has rolled directly into delayed harvesting. Fields that should already be humming with combines are sitting untouched, stocks turning brittle as farmers wait for repairs or scramble to find replacement machines. Agricultural economists are already adjusting yield projections downward, warning that the shortfall could drive food prices higher nationwide. Rural banks are feeling the squeeze as well. Farmers who financed equipment purchases months ago are now asking for loan extensions or restructuring because their orders have been canceled or indefinitely delayed. Without the expected boost from a productive harvest, many small operators are teetering on the edge of default. For the banks, these aren't just numbers on a ledger. These are customers they've known for generations, families who have always made good on their debts until now. The strain is beginning to ripple through entire county economies. In response, whispers of a government-backed farm equipment bailout are gaining traction in policy circles. The idea would be to offer emergency funding or low-interest loans for farmers to purchase from alternative suppliers, as well as subsidies for U.S.-based manufacturing startups to fill the gap left by Deere's exit. Critics argue it's a band-aid on a deeper wound, but supporters insist that without immediate intervention, America's agricultural output and food security could suffer long-term damage. Meanwhile, John Deere's leadership continues to defend the decision. In shareholder calls and public interviews, the CEO insists this is a strategic evolution that will position the company for decades of growth. He points to expanding markets overseas and the integration of advanced automation as proof that Deere is looking ahead, not backward. But in the towns and fields of rural America, the message is falling flat. The reality for many is that looking ahead means looking at an empty barn where a brand new tractor was supposed to be. By now, the fallout is clear. The $34.5 billion shutdown isn't just about one company's strategy. It's about the fragility of the systems that keep American farming alive. It's about what happens when decades of loyalty meet the cold calculus of global markets. It's about how quickly an industry can be thrown into chaos when a single player makes a bold, irreversible move. And perhaps most of all, it's about a turning point. The moment when farmers, policymakers, and entire communities have to decide whether they will rebuild the agricultural future on their own terms or watch it be reshaped by forces far beyond their control. Because in the heartland, one truth is becoming impossible to ignore. The tractors may stop, the factories may close, but the land will not wait. The seeds are already in the ground. The question now is, who will be there to harvest them?